There are some neglected subgenres that are getting some serious love right now. We got two really good religious horror movies back to back, and now a blast of a vampire flick? Horror is eating well in 2024, lads, ladies, and lake monsters. Directed by Radio Silence, the fellas behind the Scream reboots, and a screenplay helmed by Stephen Shields and Guy Busick, Abigail follows a crew of criminals hiding out in an isolated mansion as part of a blackmail scheme, and they soon realize that they're sharing the roof with something that thirsts for their blood. People seem to like when I split the video into a spoiler-free section and then go into spoilers after that for these new release movies, so I'm gonna do the same thing here. First bit of this video will be spoiler-free, and then I'll give a warning and get into spoilers. There are chapters as well, so if you want to keep an eye on when you're inching close to the spoilers and don't want them, or you just want to skip to that section, that's there for you. So this movie wasn't really on my radar, aside from seeing one trailer for it a while back before going live with Splattercast and Beyond the Void Horror podcast because they wanted to talk about the trailer and I hadn't seen it yet. And honestly, I wasn't even really planning on seeing it until earlier this week after a ton of buzz started coming up about it. Not that I wasn't interested, I'm just so busy right now that I wasn't sure I'd have time to get around to it, but damn, am I ever glad I carved out some time for it, because this movie is awesome. Right off the bat, I can very comfortably say that this is my favorite movie I've seen from Radio Silence. Now, I haven't seen everything they've made, so I'm not in a position to say it's their best work, but with the context of what I've seen from them, this by far feels like the biggest success and the most well put together and entertaining thing the duo has delivered. This isn't a slow burn vampire movie by any means, and when I saw the trailer, I figured it would be decently fun but also bland and generic, and while the movie doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything, the reason that it works so well is because it knows exactly what it is and doesn't try to pretend to be anything else. They had this concept in mind and they fully committed to creating this really amped up, stylish, humorous gore fest with the main goal being to just deliver a fun time. This is easily the most fun I've had with a horror movie so far this year. I actually didn't look much into the movie at all and I wasn't super aware of the plot itself, and once things got rolling, I was basically just grinning ear to ear the whole time. First of all, this is one I'm going to be revisiting in October because, while it's not a Halloween movie, the look and feel is going to fit so perfectly during any October marathon. It's all this warm lighting in a fancy mansion with grand staircases and libraries with grand windows. And then there are sections of the house that are more withered and look dilapidated that look like really good haunted houses. The visual tone here is just absolutely wonderful. The score from Brian Tyler is also a huge contributing factor to the vibe, and while there wasn't any music that was a huge standout or that makes me want to go back and listen to the soundtrack, it just works so well for the feel they were going for here. It's not just the aesthetics that make the tone so enjoyable, because the group of people locked in this mansion together are so ridiculously entertaining and all feel very distinct and well realized. The cast and the way they bounce off each other gave me the same sort of feeling that Knives Out does, which is a huge compliment since that's like top 10 movies for me. Not saying that this is quite as well written as that, but you get that really fun mistrust through their banter that just works so well. It's a huge help that the movie is cast incredibly well, with the group being made up of Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, William Catlett, Catherine Newton, Kevin Durand, and Angus Cloud. Barrera and Newton were the highlights for me, and especially considering a number of these characters have to cover quite a bit of ground in their performances, it's really great to see that no one missed any notes here. I'll talk more about that in the spoiler section. The dialogue is quick and witty, getting an involuntary chuckle out of me more than a few times, but it's also revealing of each of the characters and their personalities. And with something like this, where we have a group of people locked in one location together for the whole movie, it's very important that they all feel distinct so that it doesn't all blend together. And they've done a fantastic job here at creating a group of people that all feel so different from one another, but also flow together in every scene so perfectly. The characters are interesting and entertaining, and that's really all they have to be for something like this. When it comes to Abigail herself, she's so fucking awesome. A ballerina vampire is such a great idea, and while I do think they could have done a tad bit more with that concept, the way she moves through scenes with this elegant and musical violence is so enchanting. She moves the way you expect a ballerina vampire to move, but on top of that creepiness, she's also extremely brutal and has a pretty damn good sense of humor. The movie's bloodier than I was expecting it to be, but also a lot funnier than I was expecting. Humor in horror can be really hit or miss and can sometimes make me feel like I'm watching a movie made by people who are more into comedy than horror, but that's not the case here. This is candy horror at its finest. This is boutique candy horror, and the humorous elements don't at all clash with the tone or feel forced. I was also glad that every time I felt like the movie was settling into its concept and we'd then just be riding through with what had been established, they introduced some new angle to take that breathes new life into the story and constantly keeps things moving at a very nice pace. There's basically no downtime here, and it never felt like they were lazy or complacent with the vampire concept. They had fun with it, and it translates super well. Honestly, the only thing I can really say in regards to elements that hold the movie back a bit just has to do with the variety and creativity in the death scenes. I feel like with this concept, there were so many cool kill opportunities that could have been done with a ballerina vampire, and while I don't think there were any overly lame deaths, I do think I would have liked to see a bit more in this department. That's about it when it comes to the weaker elements of this movie. This is one of those things where the creators clearly understood what it was they had on their hands and fully committed to the over-the-top nature of the idea, and the result is a ridiculously fun, very stylish movie with solid characterization, a great villain, a fun story with a couple cool twists and turns, and a third act that is so insanely badass, but I can't talk about that without spoilers. I had a blast with this movie, and I will absolutely be picking up a copy for myself to rewatch this October, and I can see it becoming a staple. I should also mention that the movie is dedicated to Angus Cloud, and there's a really sweet graphic they do in his honor at the end of the movie. He plays Dean, and he was just great in this role, perfectly embodying his character and giving a good chunk of the laughs I got from this movie. He unfortunately passed away last year at 25 years old, which is tragic. I mean, he did a lot of great work in his career and he will be sorely missed, so it's nice to see them pay tribute to him here. Okay, time for spoiler talk. There are some really fun things that you don't want spoiled before going into this movie, so if you haven't seen it yet and you're planning on it, now's your time to peace out and come back to the video after you've gone to see the thing. All right, they're all gone, right? You better be gone. Giancarlo Esposito is a vampire. Do you understand me? Giancarlo Esposito is a fucking vampire. That is one of the coolest things that has ever come out of my mouth. So yeah, Abigail is not the only vampire in this movie. It turns out that she's the daughter of an underground crime syndicate run by a vampire. Lambert, Giancarlo's character, is a part of that, and on top of that awesome idea, there are a few others who also wind up getting turned throughout the course of the movie, which is what I was referring to by some of these actors needing to cover a lot of ground. Sammy, Catherine Newton's character, gets turned and essentially possessed by Abigail at one point, and there's this really cool sequence jump cutting between Abigail locked up in her room using Catherine's character to kill Kevin Durand because there's some sunlight pouring into the house and she can't be there herself. It's awesome, and Newton continues to deliver fantastic performances in everything I've seen her in. I miss Lisa Frankenstein. I'm really regretting it. I need to watch that as soon as I can. The other one is Frank, played by Dan Stevens, who gets turned by Lambert at the end of the movie as a part of a plan that Lambert had to take over the crime syndicate by ganging up on Abigail's father when he arrives, but Frank betrays him and basically becomes the villain for the rest of the movie. Essentially, Abigail has been luring and killing off her father's enemies in this house as a way to try and earn her dad's respect because he doesn't seem to show her the love in the way that she wants it. And once Frank gets turned, she makes a deal with Melissa Barrera's character, Joey, to team up and kill Frank in exchange for letting Joey leave. So you have this really great climax with Frank just discovering his vampiric abilities, fighting against an experienced vampire who's been somewhat drained of her powers since he drank from her blood, and then also throw in a super badass normie in there, and you're in for a really fun and dynamic climax. There's a great moment in this climax where Frank tries to possess Joey because he knows that vampires can possess people and influence them, control them. So he's trying to get Joey to kill Abigail, basically, but it turns out Joey's kind of like just playing along with it and tricking him. And Abigail has this line where she, what was the exact line? She goes, here's the thing about being a vampire. It takes a really long time to learn how to do the cool shit. That's a great line. One of the creative decisions that I loved in this movie is how they decided to portray the death of a vampire. Generally, you'll see them burn away into ash when exposed to the sunlight or wither away when stabbed with a stake, but in this movie, they just straight up fucking explode into blood and gore, and it's hilarious. There's one scene where Abigail is attacking someone in a basement. I can't remember who it was she was attacking, but Joey goes over and knocks some boards off a window that pour a bunch of sunlight into the room, and it hits Abigail's hand, and her hand just explodes. And there's this really cool thing where you start to see it like slowly regenerating, but it's just awesome. That fits the amped up nature of this movie so well and never failed to make my grin even stronger, so I'm glad they decided to do that. The fight at the end of the movie is a lot of fun, and there's a sequence before this all kicks off where Abigail's trapped and starts giving an exposition dump on the backstory of all the characters. This sort of thing can very easily feel lazy, but since none of these characters know each other and aren't willing to talk about their histories, it's actually a pretty smart way to give some more dimension to them, since Abigail can just know these important details. They've all actually got like fairly involved and intricate backstories to them, and Joey's involves a son that she hasn't seen because of a drug problem that she'd been working to kick. So when you learn this, there's a nice emotional side added to the adrenaline-filled fun that rounds things out very well. They managed to take out Frank after a really wild fight scene, and the movie ends when Abigail's father arrives, set initially on killing Joey, but Abigail steps in and he lets her leave. He's played by Matthew Good, by the way, and while he's only in the movie for a couple of minutes, he leaves a pretty strong impact. The build up to his reveal is great, and the performance he gives in his brief screen time goes a long way. Joey's then able to leave and drives off to go and see her son and hopefully rekindle things. It's a nice ending, albeit pretty predictable, but this also isn't the kind of thing where I get bothered by knowing how it's going to play out. As I said, this is comfort candy horror. There's another great sequence between when Sammy gets bitten and when Abigail takes possession of her, where we obviously know that something is going to happen, but we're not exactly sure what it's going to be. They don't do anything crazy with it, but it's got some really nice tension that's made stronger by Catherine Newton's performance, and I just felt like mentioning that because it was a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I really have anything more to say in the spoiler section that I didn't already cover in the spoiler-free section, but suffice it to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. It's not a game changer, it's not revolutionary, but it's also not trying to be. It's just a really damn fun vampire movie, and it's nice to see something like that get realized with such commitment and love and style. Abigail was a huge surprise for me and an absolute blast of a watch, so I definitely recommend going and checking this one out. By the way, before I go, I'm moving around my upload schedule just a little bit. The more in-depth essay-style videos are going to be coming out on Mondays now instead of Fridays, so that I can make room for the new release movies that come out Thursday nights, and then I can make my videos for them on Friday. Still the same upload frequency, just moving the days around. Speaking of which, this Monday I'll be dropping my review for The Strangers, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.